this week's program. We're going to be looking at more support flowing into North Canterbury and also some advice on what's the best supplement to feed when your back is against the wall. The other thing we're going to be talking about is cropping with Dennis Carter, and John Wally will be calling in to give us the latest on the economic situation. But in just a moment, it's commerce. Kerry, real tough times. We're going to bite the bullet and talk about dairying.
Yeah, well, obviously the Fonterra announcement recently has been a devastating blow for all the dairy farmers out there, and we're now down into two groups of farmers. We've got your farmers that own the land, and we've got our share milkers, and they're both affected in different ways, and it's pretty damn serious out there. There's some very glum-looking fellas.
Dumb question, but if I was a farmer who owned the land and I had a share milker, I'd be saying, toodaloo, and I want to put some wheat in.
Yeah, we've got dairy farmers asking that question, but the reality is you've got to go and talk to your lawyer. You've entered into a contract with your share milker, and they need to look at the fine print of what's in there, because there could be some big consequences if you just go and terminate like that.
Yeah, but I don't want to go, as a landowner, I don't want to go halves and a $500,000 loss.
No, and that's a fair question, but it could be still sitting there. It depends on what the terms of your contract are. The lawyer's got to give you advice on that. It's not as simple as saying, right, you're off, I want to do something else. You've got to check out the legal implications first.
Yeah, no, very, very wise counsel. What are the options that you're looking at?
For our farmers that own the land and got the shares in Fonterra, they've got the option of getting a 50% interest-free loan from Fonterra, and we recommend that people look at that closely. It means you get a bit of cash flow now. It is taking off future milk solid payments, but if you're a shareholder, it is a good sort of way of getting through.
You said 50 cent.
50 cents, yep.
So basically, they're forwarding to you 50 cents of the price of kgs.
So you're getting future payouts now to get you through this pain. So it's a good way of sort of easing the situation, especially if you're carrying high debt. You've got a bit of extra cash flow coming in just when you need it, and the banks are quite favourable towards it. And in fact, most of them are starting to encourage the landowners to actually get in there and take it on board. Share
milkers aren't shareholders.
No, and they miss out. So they're going to do it really tough. So they've got to go and start looking at what they've got on the farm. We're actually talking to some share milkers about culling cows, cutting back the number of cows they've got. The milk production will go down, but then also the costs of actually keeping those cows is going to go down. And the biggest one, of course, is feed. So a lot of them are buying in feed, and if you reduce your cost of that, well, at least you can get your overall cost of productions down. So yeah, looking at selling these cows at the moment.
It's a pretty cruel world, because the price of cattle have gone from about 2,000 to 1,000 and still falling.
Yeah, they have, but the beef price is looking okay at the moment. It's better to get rid of them, and rather than take big, huge losses.
Sell them as a burger, as a...
Well, basically, yeah. Yep, just send them off to the works. That's probably the best option for them. You get some instant cash flow, so at least your bank account looks a bit healthier for a while. But the biggest thing is that ongoing cost. You're actually reducing it in the long term. And when the payout comes out, you could start looking at getting the numbers back up. But for now, you've got to face that hard decision.
And it is a hard decision.
Yeah, a lot of them don't want to do it. We had one farmer, and he's actually in tears when we said to him, look, this is an option on the table. And the bank manager was backing us, and he said, yep, you've got to seriously consider getting rid of some cows. We want to have some cash flow. You can't afford to keep feeding them. And he was pretty devastated when that came out.
Is there anything else that the share milker can look at?
They've really got to look at efficiencies. So if they've got staff and they're not doing a lot of work themselves, they've got to get out there and do it themselves.
Put an apron on.
Yep, actually get out there and do the physical work. Even if it means longer hours, they've got to do anything right now to get those costs down. And so we're saying, look, if you've got staff, look at when you really need them, and if you need them at all. Some have put them on because they want a bit of an easy lifestyle, have the weekend off, whatever.
Well, they could afford it a few years ago.
But now they've got to look at it and say, well, look, we just can't afford it. I've got to get out there and do more. It's as simple as that.
Now, you've always advocated, Kerry, talk to your accountant, talk to your bank manager, and invariably both at the same time?
Yes, we're actually moving from a lot of our farmers to a monthly forecasting of cash flows down to fortnightly, and a couple of actually want to start looking at weekly, because they want to keep a tight rein on what they're spending and where they're heading. And the banks, they want to see that your accountant and you are actually sitting down, doing something and actually looking ahead, not just sort of saying, oh, this is pretty glum, I'll just try and carry on as I am. The banks are hanging in there right now, and they will hang in there for a while, but if you're not taking any action, they will start just sort of putting the pressure on.
IRD able to help at this stage?
Not at this stage, no. It's not a big adverse event, anything like that. You can obviously go and say to them, look, last year I had tax to pay, this year I'm not going to have it, and so you can ease them from that point of view. You can still do instalment arrangements, but that's about it. There's not a lot more they can do.
Because obviously the return this year is going to be very, very low compared to last year, so provisional tax is going to be quite crippling.
Yeah, and that's where you've got to go and tell them, look, you know, do your forecast or your account and say my profit's going to be down, put your estimate in.
You're going to be losing money.
Yeah, there will be a loss, so get rid of that right now. But the key is to get your books in as well. You know, the dairy season only ended a couple of months ago, and a lot of farmers haven't turned up yet at the end of your books. Get those in, get in a point of where you know where you're at, and then go to IRD and start talking to them.
Lawyers will be getting phone calls from share milkers saying, I can't handle this anymore, I'm out of here. And
yes.
that comes back to that contract business.
Yeah, it does, yeah. And in fact, we know up north, one share milker actually pulled the pin on his business and put it into liquidation a couple of weeks ago before this latest announcement. So he knew the writing was on the wall, and he went out owing $130,000. So the lawyers are getting a lot of calls about what happens if I go into liquidation. So we, you know, can I pull the pin? What does it mean in terms of what I owe? What about the contract with the landowner, etc.? So there's, yeah, big questions out there for lawyers and accountants.
And of course you can't generalise, that's on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, you've got to sit down and actually look at each agreement because they are all different. There's some where they are very similar, but then you get one little clause that tips it over and makes it a different scenario. So yeah, it's not a case of ringing up and saying, oh, I think I've got this in my agreement. You actually got to get it out, read it, and then talk to your lawyer.
I think you take it to your lawyer.
Yep.
You don't read it yourself.
No, you got to understand it yourself as well, though. But yeah, then take it in and sit down and actually go through clause by clause exactly what it means and what your obligations are.
And then say to the lawyers, I guess, I mean, I'm talking about legal and you're here as an accountant, but, you know, sort of say, well, if we get both of us in the same table, can we make in some sort of an agreement?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And the lawyer will be sort of your starting point if you want to redo the contract or get out of it. You really do need to talk to them first and then talk to the accountant as well, because there could be some implications there from getting out that you may not be aware of. So it's really a case of getting everybody together around the table and nutting it out.
Exactly. So really, there is no light at the tunnel at this stage?
Not at this stage. Long term, things probably are going to get better, but in the short term, it is really a case of knuckling down, cutting costs, getting cash flow really tight and trying to maximise what you can.
I mean, if you're too young, but in the late 80s, we had sheep farmers who were paying 20% interest and they were getting $12 a head for lamb, and they've come through it.
Yes, yeah, and the good thing for our dairy farmers is that interest rates are low right now.
Yeah, so, and the dollar's looking good.
Yeah, so they have got some sort of leeway there. You know, if the interest rates are on their way up and we're facing this, then there'd be some really tough times out there, and farmers probably would be looking at getting out and selling up.
Because it's amazing how resilient farmers can be.
Oh yeah, they're getting in there and doing it, but it's pretty hard, and it really, a lot of them are at the mercy of the bank. You know, they might get through this season, but next season, if it's not much better, some banks will actually start saying, well, I think you need to get out, especially if they've got, you know, low equity in that farm.
Gary, thank you very much indeed. And in just a moment, the city folk help those in North Canterbury. Grant, what started as a very small project has certainly snowballed.
It has, Rob. It's gone pretty viral there, that's for sure. The donations have come throughout the whole of New Zealand, and it's been gratefully received by the people up north, that's for sure.
To tell me some of the stories, because as I said, it started small.
That's true. Well, I guess looking back, it was one of those things that started a rugby game and just trying to help and get a few bales together. And I think probably in about another week's time, we'll have close to 750 bales that have been donated by everybody in the South Island, south of Christchurch. And so they'll be very pleased to know that everybody up north has received all this baleage and fed it out to all their stock.
You've had some very emotional reactions, such as transport companies, that would make you feel humble.
Well, that's true. The transport companies, and there's so many, I can't mention one particular, everybody's been very gracious. Free transport, tens of thousands of dollars worth of transport has been donated. And it's great to see that now that it's tough up there for everybody, that the transport companies are happy to help and happy to support the farmers who in good times support the transport companies. So great to see.
Now, your support and those of everyone else involved is just totally unconditional.
Well, it is definitely unconditional. The guys the phone calls we have and families, and normally the wives and husbands will call up and say, my husband would like to donate a unit load. Well, that's 42 bales. I love referring to the cost of that, because that to a town person, that's like giving their car away. And yet they continue to do it. And they'll say, we'll give you the bales, and actually we'll drop it up there for you as well. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
People are now talking share farming, which is interesting.
I think it is, Rob, I think the key to it is to be able to do the share farming, and even if you give away, let's say the 2 lambs or whatever from each ewe or one, to be able to retain that core stock and capital stock is definitely the key, and that will make things better for the following year. To get rid of that capital stock now for the farmers it's bloody tough. It's a 3 or 4 or 5 year program to get that back on top of it. So yeah, share farming's great, and we'd love to hear from anybody who would have the ability to share farm, and we'd pass it up to the guys in North Canterbury to help them.
And of course, any capital stock that's lost, it's lost to the nation as well as to the farming family.
Absolutely, yeah, it is. It's it all goes round. If the farmers aren't doing well, the town folk like ourselves, we sell our wares, our trucks to the farming community, and if things are tough, it definitely doesn't let the circle turn.
Grant, how do you find the people who are in the most need?
Well, it's been through the likes of the North Canterbury Rural Support gentlemen up there and Federated Farmers. They've been letting us know who does need it, and they've been distributing all the food up there for the different farmers. So they've got their feet on the ground on a daily basis, and they make sure the people that do need it first get it first.
Now, I know it's a hard question, but how long do you think you can keep this going for?
Well, we've got our sort of last few loads going up in this week or two, which is good, because as we know, all the spring lambs are coming about now. So I think the support will go on for a long time yet in different forms. So yeah, we appreciate all that.
There must be a point where people just can't give any more, because they're going to need it. It's a dry season coming on.
That is true, and some people that can't give away feed can jump on the phone and call their mates up and just sort of let them know that everyone's thinking about them up there, which is, it's not just food and it's not just money, it's the thought and just knowing that they can give them a holler and hopefully help out.
There's also lovely stories about city motels that are saying you can come and stay with us for nothing, and we'll give you tickets for places like the Antarctic Centre.
There's a lot of support, and there's a massive amount of support from everybody. I think the biggest thing now is making sure that these lambs can get back up on the properties, and that's going to be a bit of a tough one. And but I think if anybody who is listening that can help with some grazing or can do the sheer farming, I think that's the next step. The food's been dropped up there, that's been great. But now if there's some sheer farming opportunities, I think that's that would be a great next step for sure.
Great, we're talking about 100,000 sheep leaving North Canterbury.
That's true. There's a massive amount of sheep. I think the numbers are massive, but there's still a lot of property sort of down south that we have seen that could be donated, and that has been donated, and if that can continue going, again, another step forward. We're not going to fix things overnight by any means, but just to let them know everyone's thinking of them, and to be able to get some more grazing opportunities, it's all going to help.
So I guess anyone who can run an extra 1,000 ewes, you want to hear from them?
I think so. That'd be great, yeah. And if they get hold of me, I can put them onto the right people, and yeah, that would be great. If they had that opportunity, we'd love to hear from them.
Now, every good turn deserves another one. Tell me about the truck that you've got for sale.
This, our Isuzu D-Maxes and our GMC, our Chevrolets is something we're pretty passionate about. So if we can help anybody, please give me a call on that as well.
It looks pretty impressive, but it'd have a decent sort of a pedigree.
It sure does, yeah. This is a 6.6 litre turbo diesel, 400 odd horsepower. So yeah, it'll tow 7.5 tonnes, so it's a serious piece of kit. Our Isuzu D-Maxes, they tow 3.5 tonne, 3 litre diesel, so they're a great vehicle too. So again, it's all that, the farmers have helped us and bought from us over the time. So we want to sort of pay forward a wee bit here and assist them, and that's been one of the things that we've been pleased to do.
And Grant, on behalf of all the farmers in New Zealand, thank you.
Hey, cheers, Rob. Nice to be involved. So thank you guys.
I think if you do need a new ute or want to talk about utes, Grant Sylvester, because boy is he paying up front and doing a hell of a lot for farmers in North Canterbury. After the break, it's a case of what do you have to do to stay on the land if you're a cropping farmer?
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
Tough times for the dairying people, but not that great for cropping farmers either.
Yes, Rob. Well, cropping farmers at the moment are a bit like the old dairy farmers used to be when they changed from the cream can to the stainless steel. They had a choice of whether they invest in the stainless steel or get out of dairying. And I've had farmers say to me, this compliance cost and the things that we have to do just to carry on farming is not on for me. I'm out of it. Sell the farm, gone.
And that's happening right now.
It's happening right now. I found out about one this morning who said it 2 weeks ago, and now his land's on the market, and I know a guy who's going to buy it. And it's a young guy, and he'll buy into all this stuff, and it'll be part and parcel of his world, which is certainly not part and parcel of the farmer who's selling.
We're grey-headed chaps.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So basically, what are the stumbling blocks, Dennis?
Well, the issues really, Rob, are what farmers have to do to stay compliant, to stay in the business, so that the customers we do have will actually buy our produce. And so I guess it's being madly driven by the environmentalists and at the customer end, and saying, you know, we want the best in the world in terms of food safety and traceability, but we're not really prepared to pay for what it costs to get that. And so that is the problem. And the problem is the education required around farmers to be able to actually fill these things in, so that they can be audited and that they can be compliant. And this auditing thing and the requirements, the headlong rush to actually get all this done is just crazy. And you know, the amount of inspectors, the amount of auditors that are going to be required. You and I were talking earlier about, you know, what's going to happen with the fertiliser industry, and can they handle it within the time frame?
Well, the answer is no.
The answer is definitely no. And for instance, our farm is in a phosphate runoff area, and so by January 2016 we actually have to apply for a resource consent to carry on farming. Now that is just crazy. You know, give us time to understand the problem, to take some steps to mitigate it. In fact, if we can mitigate those problems that potentially are happening there. But you know, I've numbered off 11 different compliances and things that farmers have to do to stay in the game. And some of them are you know, people like Foundation for Arable Research are putting on workshops and things like that to try and bring farmers up to speed. But I guess there'll be less than 50% of those cropping farmers who actually will attend those types of things.
Why is that? Because they don't want, or they just think it's all too hard?
It's all too hard. They're too busy actually farming. And they just think, well, it's not necessary. But I think there'll be some doors start slamming shut fairly soon. We're being forced to comply with these sorts of things. And, you know, even like, it's no longer acceptable to be just an irrigator and potentially waste water, our irrigators will probably be forced to do variable rate irrigation. So some of them can do a rudimentary job now by speeding up or slowing down, but there'll be areas in fields and paddocks where some of the soil type is different, might be a bit of a wet area. Well, those irrigators will have to be sophisticated to the point where they don't put as much water on those gullies or things like that. And, you know, the science is there, but it goes with a cost.
And
yeah.
basically you're just being told what to do. You can't sort of say, well, yep, I've been irrigating with this unit, this rotor-rainer for the last however long.
Sure. Well, it's pretty black and white what is required and not required. To be able to get up to speed, to gear up to speed, to buy the specific equipment to comply is the problem. And then actually there has to be, at the end of the day, it has to be viable. It has to be financially viable to do all this, and not just get clever toys that appease somebody else. Clever toys that don't cost too much or have some savings, so that you can continue farming viably. And you know, we could invest in all of this and sort of do ourselves out of a job and say, well, you know, no, I can't run that many sheep because they poo too much, like cows, or they wee too much. Can't do that anymore, so what are we going to do? We'll get backed into a corner where the options are just not there.
I mean, it's a no-win situation. If it's costing you more than it is to farm, as far as returns are concerned, I mean, cropping now is in the same light as dairying.
Yes, well,
but
you
for
know,
a different reason.
Exactly. Well, you know, you could fill your farm with barley now and grow barley and go broke. Even with top yields, you go broke. So we can't afford to do that. We've got to cherry pick more valuable crops because our land's so expensive. The inputs are higher, the management skills are higher. There's just going to be this real lift in what's required. And you know, some of our buyers are multinationals, and they don't care if they find a plant growth regulator in traces of wheat or barley or something. They just throw their arms in the air and say New Zealand's worse than the rest of the world. You're not going to use that again. Then a northwest wind comes along, the barley hasn't been sprayed with a plant growth regulator to control ear break, neck break, and half the crop's on the ground. So work your way around that one. There is no other choice than that particular product, and those levels that have been found are actually below the requirements of the international market.
But they still say there's some there, so they throw their arms in the air and say, no, cancel New Zealand.
Exactly. So that's the sort of reactionary thing that New Zealand farmers are against. You know, the customer's always right, the customer's whim. The companies in between don't quite understand how it all works or doesn't work, or why we use it. You know, it's an expensive thing to do, and the timing has to be right. So why would we want to use it? We use it to mitigate risk, and that's what it's all about.
I mean, we got through the DDT thing, and now there's this ugly looking heads coming back up.
It is. We did manage the DDT thing, and that was, you know, mixing the soil up and diluting it amongst what was happening there, or finding it in the first milking of the heifers, so dumping that milk and things like that. These are clever things that New Zealand farmers are capable of adapting to, but some of them, and because they're compounding, some farmers just had enough.
Dennis, thank you very much indeed. Just a moment, we're going to be talking with Megan about how to get through feeding stock when all you've got is supplements. Megan, things are pretty tough, especially in North Canterbury, so what are the feed options for sheep?
Okay, so there's a lot of feed options out there. From a mill side of things, with Reliance Nutrition, we sell sheep nuts, and we've created a drought sheep nut as well with a higher protein percentage in it. But we also sell a lot of barley. Barley's still a good option, and the price of barley has come down a lot. So that's great for the sheep guys out there needing to feed barley. There's also palm kernel. Palm kernel's getting considered more widely now with sheep guys. you've just got to watch the copper, and the copper content in palm kernel is a huge concern.
Why is that?
Sheep can't naturally excrete the copper, and it builds up in their liver. And when they get under stress, now that stress could be 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, or a year down the track. There's no full research, proper research done about that. But the copper gets excreted from their liver and goes into their bloodstream, and it can cause it kills the red blood cells, and the main symptom of copper toxicity, unfortunately, is death.
Yeah,
so
that's a bit serious.
it's the final result, really. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So what do you do? Do you do autopsy, or how can you check the levels?
Liver biopsies are the best way because that's where the copper is stored. So it's an instant capture of the liver. Liver biopsies are the best way. You can do that ideally when they're still alive, just to test a live biopsy, and the vets need to do that.
Just a percentage of your flock.
Yes, yep, just to get a good idea. And the problem with feeding palm kernels as well, a lot of people don't know their beginning copper status, so they could naturally have a high copper status before you go supplementing with a high copper feed. Clovers and a lot of pastures are naturally high in copper. So there are other options. There is a product called soy hull, so that's a byproduct of soybean, and it's pelletised. It's an imported product, but it's pelletised. Very similar to feeding palm kernel. It's rumen friendly. It's about half the copper content of palm kernel, so it's a lot safer to feed. Nice rumen friendly product. Doesn't have any vitamins and minerals in it, but it's a high NDF, about 67% NDF, and it's a really good.
NDF being?
The fibre value of the feed, really, yeah.
What about the EME values?
You're looking at about 11 ME, so still quite high in ME. It's good feed value, really. And they also, you compare soy hull to palm kernel on paper, and they're very similar. But the sheep, the way the soy hull is processed in the rumen, it's a lot more rumen digestible than palm kernel. A lot of palm kernel has to get broken down in the small intestine, but the soy hull will break down in the rumen, so it's quickly absorbed and quickly more turned into energy.
So it's processed a lot better.
Yeah, it's processed a lot better, yes, exactly. Yeah.
You also have barley as an option?
Yes, yep, so you've got the whole barley. The main concern with whole barley is you just have to introduce it gradually. There's that 7 to 10 day build up really on when you need to feed. Gradually build it up. You wouldn't go and offer a sheep 150, 200 grams of barley on day dot. So you need to build that up over that 7 to 10 days. And there's also, there's on average about 15% screenings in barley. So about 15% doesn't get utilised and it passes through the sheep. But with barley price coming down, it's definitely a good option. But then also if you're paddock feeding it, when we are getting a little bit of moisture, there can be a lot of wastage as well with the sheep trampling into the soft ground.
And you mentioned sheep nuts.
Yes, so we make a 12mm sheep nut, so it's a nice big sheep nut. Great for paddock feeding, you don't get hardly any wastage with it. It's got a full mineral pack in it, it's wheat and barley based, so it's high starch, great for that mating and feeding right up to lambing stage. You can feed it definitely through lambing, if the ewes have been fed it for a long time, through that lambing, and then lambs will start nibbling on it as well. And we can make it into a smaller pellet for lambs, or to be fed through an advantage feeder for lambs.
Megan, I guess price is a real big issue as far as the farmers are concerned.
Yes it is, yeah, and it all comes down to price, and there's not a lot of spare money around at the moment, so it's just trying to work with and a lot of what I do at the moment is trying to work with what a farmer requires on feed, if they're needing energy or a filler, or if they're needing to put condition on, or if they're wanting ewes to produce more milk. So it's really customising and finding a feed that works with their budget that's going to be the best value.
So you do all that as part of your services?
Yes, we do, yeah. So a lot of it's over the phone, but I'm only a phone call away to get out on farm as well. And we've got actual nutritionalists that work for us in our mill, so they formulate our feeds, and they're only a phone call away, and we can get them out on farm as well, but that's part of our service.
I'm really impressed because you said that you looked at North Canterbury and there was a drought problem, and so you went ahead and devised a special sheep nut for them. Yeah,
we just wanted to try and formulate something. A lot of farmers are needing a bit higher protein, especially for their multiples, so any ewe that's carrying twins or more, they're needing a bit higher protein. So we've formulated two drought nuts. One's a 12 percent protein and one's a 15% protein. The 15% seems to be our biggest seller. And we've got a tiny bit of soy hull, a tiny bit of palm kernel and a little bit of soy hull in there just to try and keep that price back. But the majority of it is barley and wheat, plus all your full mineral pack. And it's just designed to be a bit cheaper, really. Yeah.
So the bottom line is that you're getting on with intensive feed.
You are, yes. And with ewes being heavily in lamb, you're trying to get, the feed value. You may need to feed them from a feed value wise. They may need 3 kgs of a good quality, say, lucerne hay. Now, you carrying twins will not be able to physically eat 3 kgs of hay. So it's all about trying to find a rich, dense feed, something that's high in ME but low in volume. So that's where your sheep nuts come in.
There's a ratio, isn't there? Was it 3% of a ewe's body weight that it can eat?
Yeah, 3% of their body weight is on average what a ewe will eat. So yes.
Or should eat.
Or should eat, yeah, if it's available. Yeah, and if she's got room, yeah.
Very interesting times, aren't they? After the break, we're going to be looking at the world scene and sort of basically economics.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
John, the latest OCR?
Well, we had the 0.25% cut last month. It was the second one from the month before, and the 2 that were corrected that should never have been done in the same 2 months last year. So we're back now at the 3% level, and I reckon there's more downside. I think there's a clear trend that we're going to have to respond. We've seen a bit of doom and gloom around the economy now, so more cuts to come in my view.
So that's interest rates coming down?
That's interest rates coming down.
Which is a good thing as far as people like dairy farmers.
Well, if you've got lots of debt, it's a very good thing. If you've got deposits in the bank, probably not so good. But certainly from the general tenor of the world, I think to some extent a fall in OCR is hostage to what's going on in the rest of the economy now.
You wouldn't want a whole lot of money in a savings account.
Well,
right
that's
now.
right, exactly. But you wouldn't want a whole lot of debt either. So.
Let's talk dairying, because that affects everybody.
Well, we've seen dairy. We saw Friday 385 is now the payout forecast, and there's probably downside on that. And so things are pretty tough right now. And so we go back to the conversation I think we had in January. It's pull the belt in, save where you can, and really focus on the cost side of the business. Because
there will be some who will actually be lost.
Oh, there's at the extreme and in the margin. There'll some who will not be able to stand up to the pressure, but the sooner you recognise that, the sooner you get onto it, the better. You remember we talked about selling toys?
Yes.
And I said if you've got toys, sell them early, because you don't want to be selling them when everybody else is.
So that's the jet boat.
That's all of those things. You know, it is. You need to be in the market before everybody else is. Otherwise, price will fall.
Well, the other thing is, you're looking at selling stock, and the prices of stock's coming down like a duck.
And the more people selling, that drives the price down. So that's really the thing. If you're going to move, best not to close your eyes to the situation. It is think it through, move early rather than move late.
Because it's not going to disappear, is it?
It's not going to go away. This is something that I think is with us now for at least 2 seasons and possibly more. I'm reading the headlines this morning. Commodities globally are still soft, and it's not just the sort of soft commodities like milk powder. It's oil. It's iron ore. It's still soft.
And that's the problem, isn't it? It's the world economy, it's not New Zealand.
New Zealand sooner or later lives, particularly in the dairy industry, lives in a global market. Certainly we couldn't sustain the number of dairy cows we've got just off the population in New Zealand.
Brings me to TPP and the fact that dairying was the sticking point.
Well, there was a number of sticking points, but dairy was certainly one of them. And it was the Canadians and the Japanese who were doing the pushback. I think it was possibly the Americans, but they were hiding behind the others. I think you remember in the EU in the old days, the Brits always used to say, well, we should have a clean market in agricultural products, knowing that the French were never going to allow it. So they let the French run point on that one. Right. And so there's a bit of North America letting the Canadians and the Japanese run point on dairy. But we got the ISDS, or the sort of investor-state dispute settlement. We got Pharmac and we got dairy, and they were still sticking points. There was talk after the last round in Maui, I think it was. I think we were all having a holiday in Hawaii. We're having that conversation. It fell apart. There was still talk that it could be resurrected in August, but if not, it falls into various elections and the political difficulties, so it stalls.
How many people actually understand what TPP was all about?
Well, I think everybody understands it really was about trade and against the trade. But in all trade negotiations, it's sort of you and I are negotiating. You know, we're buying the second-hand car, I'm selling it, you're buying it, you want to pay the least amount, I want you to pay the most amount, and that's what these negotiations are. But now if we've got sort of 4 people buying the car because they're going to share the usage, and we've got 3 people selling the car because they're going to split the money, it all starts to get a bit more complicated. But in essence, it's a trade agreement. It's a trade agreement around the Pacific, and if we could get a sensible deal around the things that are important and not get too sidelined about it's secret and there's something else, there's a sort of a paranoia underpinning it, I think there's a good outcome. But if the outcome can't be negotiated, particularly from the New Zealand interest, we should be prepared to walk away. Because if you're not prepared to walk away, however you're going to get a deal done that makes sense.
It's interesting you should say walk away. We've been talking about dairy farmers walking away, cropping farmers walking away.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That's the issue of giving up. At some point, if you're not prepared to give up, it's hard to be realistic about the opportunity.
And it's a case of good money after bad, or bad money after whatever the saying
is. Bad money after good.
Yes,
you know, and that's the thing. Can I see the light at the end of the tunnel? Is it a light, or is it a train coming in the other direction? And so that trying to be as realistic as possible becomes the issue. So Gross is facing an idea that says, can I get a deal here? Can I get a deal that I can sell back home, or can't I? If I can't, I might as well say no here, because I'm going to carry the can when I get back home. Similarly, in terms of facing a debt mounting or the fact you've got negative cash flows, there comes a point when you say, I can't make this work. Best come to that conclusion early rather than coming to that conclusion late.
And that's cost you a lot more money.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Greece.
Greece, well, Greece seems to have fixed its world up. It's found a lot more money. 86 billion is the current conversation. And the grouping inside Europe, and I think I've put a bit of a link up on Greece, the good documentary I came across, worth a watch if anybody's got 40 minutes, and talking about the Greek problem and the things that created that. But right now, the Germans apparently are being more and more isolated, and they are coming very close to a deal with only the Germans on the other side of the fence, the Finns and the new Eastern European countries who were very tough on Greece, and now say, no, these guys are playing the game, we now need to help them, we're all Europeans here. So it's looking like 86 billion over a 3-year period to fix it all up with even more debt.
Yeah, we come back to walking away, but it's interesting that Germany is now looking as though it's going to be isolated.
Well, Germany was leading the hardline pack on the sort of let's get rid of Greece sort of discussion, yeah. Or the Greeks will never sort of agree to what needs to be done, or they won't do it if they do agree. and they are increasingly isolated. It's just the German pushback. And when that happens, I think that we'll see a political deal. The political deal leads to the sort of financial one, and things will settle down for a while. But Greece still has, Europe still has that problem of balancing the nation-state problem. We'd never hear in the US about Arkansas's got a debt problem or California's got a debt problem. We might talk about in terms of state government, but not at federal level, because the transfers happen inside the US without anybody really seeing it happen.
John, thank you very much indeed for unravelling a very complicated situation. We've got more for you on the program straight after the break.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website, ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
Roger, very little pasture growth this time of year, very dry conditions. What's your advice as far as options is concerned?
It's extreme dry at the moment, and over drilling anything at this point in time until we get some significant rain, we just can't. We've just got to sit on our hands. Hopefully we get rain or something, maybe not too much snow this weekend. We'll have moisture in the ground and possibly get nitrogen-based fertiliser onto the soil and get things motoring early. The other option we're looking at, once the soil temperatures get consistently over 7 degrees, is to using a mixture of pro-jib and nitrogen to try and get that extra dry matter ahead under these extreme dry conditions.
Be very tempting to put the direct drill over it and oversow it though.
It is. We looked at some paddocks today at the field day, and you got some paddocks where the grass content is actually less, probably 30%. But you've got a plant there and other plants with an existing root structure. That's going to get first priority to any moisture, and you're trying to get the new seedlings established. It just doesn't work. You end up with a very, very poor response. So you're better to spray everything out, start again. And the idea of spraying out is to kill the weeds, but the big bonus is you're conserving moisture until the soil temperature is ready to drill whatever, whether it's a cereal or a brassica.
Soil moisture retention must be vital.
It's essential in this year because there's nothing deep down. It is we go down probably 50 mils, and it's just basically hard ground. So it's quite serious. We just got to try and make the most of every bit of moisture we get.
What about lucerne?
Lucerne's a wonder plant. Just looking around at some of the paddocks that have died out through overgrazing, whatever. But lucerne, at the end of the day, I don't think there's been any plant loss. We've got a situation here. There's a paddock here on Rotoiti on the property we're on at the moment, and that is actually 25 years old, and it's been sprayed this year to remove some weeds. It's still going. It's getting a bit thin, but it's right down in the Scargill Creek area, and the roots are into the moisture, and it's still performing very, very well.
Roger, it seems as though lucerne gets away quicker in your grass pastures?
Lucerne actually starts to grow at a air temperature of about 5 degrees. Your ryegrass and other plants are based on soil temperature, but actually lucerne is based on air temperature. So you'll find a lot of lucerne will actually, this early spring, will actually move ahead of ryegrass reasonably quickly initially.
Now, if you're going to go from pasture to lucerne, because this won't be our last drought, what do we need to do?
I don't like going straight out of old pasture into lucerne. It's too much reversion back to the old grasses, and you want to make sure you got your pH right, and by liming it can take up to 4 months for that to work. So we really want to be taking a paddock out sometime this later spring, summer fallowing it and going into a winter feed, a break crop, maybe if you can over 2 years, take some break crops and get it into the lucerne, because that's going to be in for a long term, 8 to 10 years. So we just want to make sure we've got rid of all the perennial weeds such as dandelions and hawksbeard and all those other very, very difficult to control weeds, and especially twitch and other grasses. So we want to make sure it's really clean before we start on lucerne. Don't rush it.
Turning the seasons here, whether we're ready or not.
Yeah, we are. It is closer than further away, that's for sure. Despite the fact that we might have had some really cold weather in the last 2 or 3 days, couple of days, Sunday, Monday particularly. We're getting much closer to the beginning of the season. The one thing that people do need to be really cognizant of, though, is their soil temperatures. When you get cold snaps that come through, particularly with heavy frosts, a little bit of snow on the ground, then your temperatures at 10 centimetres plummet very quickly. They've plummeted to quite low single digit numbers right now. We're down around the 3s and 4s. So it takes some time now at this time of the year to actually get those temperatures back up again. People might have been lulled into a little bit of false security when we had that sequence of northwesterly weather a number of weeks ago, where we got to 20-degree days, and soil temperatures actually rose very quickly on those days, simply because we've got a little more day length on our side now. It is lighter in the mornings, it's lighter at nights, which means that we have longer during the day for the solar radiation to get in and raise soil temperatures, and we've slipped past that period where solar radiation is at its lowest. We're now on the climbing of solar radiation. It lags behind the shortest day, for about 6 to 8 weeks. So everything's on the move upwards now. But we do need to be very cognizant of those soil temperatures before thinking about when that irrigation season is going to start.
You don't want to be putting cold water onto cold ground anyway.
Well, it's not so much the cold water, unless you're taking it out of the canal from Mount Cook, for example, where it is going to be maybe 4 or 5 degrees. Our groundwater is relatively consistent in temperature. It sits around 11 degrees. So it's the fact that you will get the soil wet and then it gets cold again. It's very hard to warm up when it's wet. Right now, when we've got a small deficit and we've got air in the system, then it'll warm up much more quickly, and which is why everybody wants to sort of farm on light soils, because you get very early warming. Stones are a good thermal mass, so they warm up much more quickly. So it's irrigating inappropriately at this time of the year when your soil temperatures are just marginal, getting the soils wet and then getting followed by a cold snap that then gets the soils cold and they're very hard to warm up again.
I guess the other big thing is that you've got an allocation and you don't want to start throwing that around too early.
Yeah, I think the 2014-15 irrigation season has brought that home to roost a little bit. A large number of people exceeded their annual volumes. Haven't quite heard how Environment Canterbury is going to deal with those.
They'll think of something.
There will be some issues around that as all the compliance reports arrive. So a lot of that arose because people started early, didn't think about whether they needed to irrigate during a period in 2014 when it was actually relatively cool and we didn't need to be irrigating, and ran out when we most needed it in the late summer, early autumn. So I think it's it's probably a very good lesson to keep in your back of your mind. It's very fresh. Let's use water very sparingly if we can in the spring. Watch those soil temperatures. Only apply the small amount that you might need. I don't see us having to start right now before September.
That's good.
Which is a blessing. I mean, everybody was probably thinking about, and I know some people were seriously thinking about irrigating a few weeks ago when we had those balmy northwesterly weathers. Well, goodness, 2 days of that is not the summer. So let's be objective about this. Let's take some measurements. Soil temperature is really important at this time of the year, and we don't have much of a deficit now. It's disappeared a bit. It did develop a little bit for a while. It's disappeared now. It's going to take some time to develop again. Just put the irrigators away probably till about the beginning of September,
just
I think.
back.
Yeah. And be very conscious of the fact that those annual volumes are there for a purpose, and while you might get a small wrap over the knuckles once, you won't get a small wrap over the knuckles twice.
So this is basically saying that you've got a consent to take so much water out of a well.
Yeah, and it's mostly associated with groundwater. I mean, almost everybody now that is taking water from groundwater has an annual volume, X number of cubic metres. It might be 500,000, it might be 1 million, whatever it happens to be. It is a consent condition, and it is very rigidly enforced. So
obviously there's meters on everything.
Oh yeah, I mean, everybody, another issue as well, everybody that takes more than 10 litres a second should have a water meter by now. And if they don't, then that's another issue that will come home to roost if they don't have a water meter, if they're taking more than 10 litres a second. That should have been completed by November, that should have been installed by November 2014. So we're very close to a year after that event, so if it's not in now, then you're probably taking an unnecessary risk turning a pump on because somebody will be watching.
There'll be somebody watching.
Yep.
Somebody's going to drive up your drive and say, look, I've just come in to double check.
Yeah, and look, it's they'll pull power records to see what you've done in the years that you should have been compliant.
That's a bit unsporting.
Well, I'm sorry, that's the way it is. And
this that is the way it is.
And that is in fact a national standard. This is not a Canterbury-wide standard. This is a national standard. I mean, it was brought in about 2010, I think, from memory, and the first block was 2012, so all the really big tanks were 2012, November. Next block was 2014. And the next block will be 2016, November 2016. So it's not like we didn't know about it, and people didn't know about it nationwide. But if it hasn't been done, then you are a culpable party.
Well, you're breaking the law.
You are breaking the law nationwide, yeah. This is a national standard.
Yep.
So,
looking forward?
Oh, looking forward. Look, we're still very much in an El Nino type pattern. If you look at the weather systems that we're getting, we're not getting anything southeasterly or truly southerly. It's mostly southerly to southwesterly, which is very typical El Nino conditions for this time of the year. All of the worldwide, all of the weather organisations, NOAA, Weather Zone in Australia, NIWA in New Zealand, they sort of follow suit a little bit after the party, but everybody's talking El Nino type conditions for the spring and the summer, and for it to be relatively strong. And I think that's something we also need to take into consideration. It's here. The indicators are here. It doesn't guarantee that we're going to get that absolutely strong El Nino, but all the indicators of El Nino, northwesterly weather, hellishly wet on the west coast, dry over the eastern areas, just because of the weather pattern, with the wind directions and the convective wind coming down off the mountains. We're looking at El Nino type conditions for the spring and the summer.
It's going to be a very busy season, Tony. Thank you very much indeed. If you'd like to catch up again on what Tony has just been advising us, go to our website, which is www.tandem ontheland.co.nz. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you have just missed the program, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.